All right, let's go to my panel now. Shadow Environment Minister John O'Donoghue, Senator John O'Donoghue, and Pauline Hanson's One Nation Chief of Staff James Ashby join me now. Both gents, great to have you company. I'll start with you, James. This Talkfest in Canberra, it strikes me as bizarre. They've all been brought to Canberra, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to discuss cost of living, but we're paying the bill.
Yeah, we sure are, and it's you can do your own figures. It's at least $500,000 a day, and then by the time you add staff onto that, you're probably looking at $1 million a day. And what for? It is a talk fest, and at the end of today, you're going to find they're all back at the lodge drinking on the PM's account, which obviously we don't see the cost of that. But let me tell you, it'll be the finest of champagne, wines, and beers, and again at yours and my expense.
Yeah, never get in front of a Labor socialist and a bottle of Grange. I've seen that before firsthand with my own eyes. Jono, issues with building a new home in Australia. Look, we know they're expensive anyway. Mortgages are going up too. Building costs, if you can get a builder, are growing exponentially. But I tell you, it's going to get worse. We're going now from a minimum mandated 6-star rating to 7 stars. These changes are supposed to make us more energy efficient and climate conscious. But how much is this going to add to the price of a new home?
Well, that goal that the Labor Party sets before the last election of building a certain number of houses to house all these people that didn't have them, couldn't afford them, that goal is becoming even further off into the distance because of these sorts of mandated standards that they're bringing in. It is, as you say, extremely expensive to be able to build a home, to buy the land, if you can find a builder. I used to chair the building ministers' meeting, state, territory and Commonwealth ministers, and it always alarmed me that when we were signing up to these targets, we never, ever, ever, or the state and territory ministers, being the only ones who would get a vote at these meetings, would never consider the cost of these standards. It was always purely on whether it was about access or energy efficiency. All of these things do add cost, and it is going to make it much harder in this cost of living crisis to build a home as a result of these changes.
James, this is a huge sleeper issue right around Australia, but firefighters in Queensland are onto it first of all. They're calling for a boycott on e-scooters being modified. They're saying that there's a real chance of fires from these lithium-ion batteries. These are rechargeable batteries. You might buy a decent battery with the bike, but people go and replace them with a Chinese battery on the internet. Fires are happening everywhere. We're getting battery fires, of course, on the scooters. We've got a case of a bike burning down an apartment in North Bondi last week in Sydney. There was a big EV fire at Sydney Airport in September last year. We've certainly seen big EV fires overseas as well. We're being pushed down the way of EVs, but we need to watch this carefully, don't we?
Yeah, we sure do, and especially insurance companies, they'll find any way out of paying out a claim. So if you actually have modified a product and then you find that they do an investigation because it was sparked by it could be a scooter, it could be a electric drill, or it could be, God help us, a lot of these, garden appliances that are now coming out with electric batteries. If you're using something that's not specified for that product, of course, an insurance company is likely to neglect or say, no, I'm sorry, that onus is on you. These are deadly fires, and because so many people's garages are now connected to their house, unlike up here where we've got a bit of extra land where we can have a garage actually built off the house, you're going to find this will put people's lives at risk as well. So, yeah, there's a lot to look out for. If I were you, I just wouldn't buy anything second-hand. You never know whether it's ended up in the drink and it's got future problems. Buy something new, buy something with Australian accreditation, and be very aware not to charge these things overnight. Keep an eye on them.
And I tell you, I want the government to get on top of this before we get EVs forced upon us in a mandatory way as well, electric vehicles. Jono, Islamic leaders, well, they're set to lobby the federal government because they want HECS debts axed for Muslim uni students. They say the debts are considered usury, which is forbidden under Sharia law, but we're not a Sharia law country. And I tell you, as a taxpayer, if we're letting a student borrow money on HECS, I want it paid back with interest. And I don't think religion is a grounds to get out of it.
No, this is an outrageous request, I find. We are governed by the law of Australia, set by the Australian Parliament, which is elected by the Australian people, no matter what their faith background is. And we shouldn't be setting up new arrangements for anyone based on faith when it comes to things like HECS debts. Where would we draw the line? If we do it for one group, we're going to have to do it for another. And so, no, I don't think that there should be any special arrangement to give anyone, which it would be an advantage for one group of people based on their faith to not have to pay back a debt that everyone else has to. I know there are some financial institutions that provide Sharia-compliant financing services. Perhaps they can step into the void. But if you want to learn at our universities and you need to take out a HECS debt to be able to do so, well, the rules are there for all to see. But I don't think we should be setting up a new set of rules to cater to one group of people based on faith alone. A very, very bad precedent.
Hey, James, just quickly, I mean, this New Hampshire win today, 2 for 2. Trump looks unassailable. I think Haley will struggle on until she runs in her own state's primary. Then she's out. Now, yes, it's talking points over there in the US. People are fascinated by this race. I tell you what, there's a lot in the media here and the elites who are nervous to see a return of Trump for the fear that this sort of populist politics, you might call it, but politics designed to shake up the system, lest that arrive here in Australia.
Well, it's called common sense politics, and that's why Trump's getting the support of the Americans. And he will win later on this year. 2025 is going to be a massive year for Trump. Look, they had 2.5 million illegal migrants come across the southern border last year alone. How do you deal with that? We had 50,000 under the Rudd-Gillard years, and we knew how tough that was. The Americans are being smothered by illegal migrants. He wants to reapply tariffs. Who can blame him when China and other developing nations are undermining the American dream and jobs and quality products that have been brought into the country? And of course, he hasn't let up on draining the swamp. Of course, he wants to get rid of so many of those bureaucrats. I think Americans love him. Mark II, Donald Trump is going to be better than the first Donald Trump we saw when he was first president.
I think every politician is older and wiser and perhaps a little bit more dangerous. Senator Duniam, thank you. James Ashby, great to have you as always.